From Final Fantasy and Pokemon all the way to Minecraft, Dragon Quest can be seen everywhere, and it can be seen in so many varied things. Yet despite the undeniable influence of the franchise, it still remains largely overshadowed, at least in the West. But in what ways did Dragon Quest actually inspire so many things? Initially inspired himself by Western RPGs like Wizardry and Ultima, Yuji Horii wanted to create a game which was more appealing to the Japanese audience. Notably, he's gone on record in an interview with the late Satoru Iwata, stating that Dragon Quest was designed to be approachable and to bring people into gaming, and it worked. The first Dragon Quest sold somewhere in the region of 2 million copies, making it one of the best-selling games on its original platform, and, except for Zelda 2, the best-selling RPG on the Famicom, at least until Dragon Quest 2, 3 and 4 released. And that's saying a lot, if the only games that can usurp the throne are the sequels. If nothing else, Dragon Quest can really be credited with popularising the genre. But there is something else. In fact, there's a lot else. Dragon Quest's DNA is embedded in so many games that came after it. Hironobu Sakaguchi released Final Fantasy roughly 1 year after the release of Dragon Quest I. And despite his desire to make this game predating Dragon Quest, Sakaguchi himself in a Forbes interview credits Dragon Quest with the existence of Final Fantasy. He states that given at the time Square's precarious position, and the huge success and, I quote, massive genius of Dragon Quest, he was able to launch the Final Fantasy project. In a popular Netflix documentary series called High Score, they shine a light on Final Fantasy and their desire to make a RPG inspired by Wizardry and Ultima. And this is absolutely true, but it was also true for Dragon Quest a whole year earlier. Yet the episode, despite being about the history of RPGs, completely omits any mention to the Dragon Quest franchise. That's not to disparage the huge impact that Final Fantasy has had, but it goes to show, at least in the West, just how overshadowed Dragon Quest is, that a big production would completely ignore the franchise. Again, that's not to disparage the huge impact and influence of Final Fantasy, but if Final Fantasy owes some of its existence to Dragon Quest, then so too does everything that came after. Dragon Quest really is a genre-defining franchise, and although turn-based combat existed long before Dragon Quest, it's Dragon Quest that helped to popularise and standardised the menu-based battle system in such a digestible way, in such a way that games still use to this day. But the ignorance on the impact of Dragon Quest is only a thing here. In Japan, the importance of the franchise is completely apparent. In a 1990 interview, Yuji Horii and Shigeru Miyamoto sat down to talk about Nintendo's newest hardware and the impact it might have on their franchises. Miyamoto stated, "They're simply amazing. In the Dragon Quest I and Dragon Quest II era, I think everyone was looking for a way to make the game feel like a real adventure. And while other games did achieve it, Dragon Quest is the game that really polished the gameplay loop and paved the way for many RPGs to come." On the topic of Miyamoto and Nintendo, the existence of the entire Street Pass feature on Nintendo 3DS, a feature whereby users could passively exchange data between 3DS systems, can be linked directly back to Dragon Quest IX. On the Nintendo DS, there was a feature known as Tag Mode, which was sort of the precursor to Street Pass and enabled wireless communication between DS systems. Although not the first to implement the feature, Dragon Quest IX can easily be credited with the popularisation of that feature. In an instalment of Iwata Asks titled How the Nintendo 3DS Was Made, when discussing Street Pass, Iwata says the tag mode in Dragon Quest IX Sentinels of the Starry Sky became a social phenomenon. It was our platform, and they had made excellent use of the function we put forth. High praise from the at the time president and CEO of Nintendo. In this same installment of Iwata Asks, Iwata talks to Hideki Kono, most known for his work on the Mario Kart and Nintendogs franchises. In this interview he talks about how his son was so obsessed with the feature in Dragon Quest IX, and not with the implementation in Nintendogs, that this was the only reason his son came out on trips with him so he could find treasure maps and pass other people who were playing the game. It's worth noting that Kono was also the hardware director for the 3DS, and most notably credited with his work on Street Pass. Maybe he just developed it so his son would keep spending time with him. That's already some huge things that have been inspired by Dragon Quest, but it's far from the end. In the Pokemon franchise, trading has always been possible, whether it's through network communication or through using a link cable on a Game Boy. And a story told by Satoshi Tajiri, the creator of Pokemon, in a 1998 interview, linked Dragon Quest directly to the origins of Pokemon trading. This is quite a well-known story at this point. But when Dragon Quest II released, he was playing with a friend of his, and that friend will be important in a moment. And the game introduced an item called the Mad Cap, a very rare item with a drop rate of 1 in 128. When playing the game, his friend Ken Sugimori, illustrator of Pocket Monsters and art director of the Pokemon franchise, told you it would be important, actually got 2 of these items. And Tajiri was frustrated that he was unable to get one and his friend happened to get 2, and there was no way to transfer the item from his friend's copy onto his. The link cable for the Game Boy would have made that possible. It's noted that until then the link cable was primarily used for competition and not collaborative play, and Pokemon is widely credited as being the first franchise to introduce cross-game trading mechanics. Trading had existed in games earlier, but not as a persistent transfer between copies of games. Linking Dragon Quest directly in partly inspiring a new way to utilise the Game Boy, and having some part in the spawning of trading mechanics between copies of games. But this isn't Dragon Quest's only link to the Pokemon franchise. Question: what comes to mind when I say Mystery Dungeon? For many, and for Google, what comes to mind is Pokemon, and more Pokemon. But the very first Dragon Quest spin-off, called Toneko's Great Adventure, was the first Mystery Dungeon game, released in 1993 on the Super Famicom, and therefore Japan only. A game about Toneko, the merchant from Dragon Quest IV, went on to become this long-running series, connecting franchises like Pokemon, Final Fantasy and more. The impact of the Dragon Quest franchise really spreads far and wide, even so far as Minecraft. Minecraft in its own right was and is an absolute phenomenon. It's my most played game of all time, but you wouldn't think that Dragon Quest would have inspired it. The famous logo designed by Junkboy, the creative director at Mojang, Marcus noted that in the design of the Minecraft logo, he was inspired by 2 logos, and one of which was the fantasy flavour of the Dragon Quest logo. Funny how Dragon Quest shows up even in the most unlikely places, and how inspirations can come full circle, with Dragon Quest releasing the Minecraft-esque Builders series years later. But has all of the influence of Dragon Quest being positive? There's a well-known urban myth which has been purveyed and debunked countless times at this point about the Dragon Quest law, and how the Japanese government forbade the release of Dragon Quest games on weekdays. There is no law about this. However, the core of the story was always true. People all across Japan were skipping school and work to play these games, with numerous police complaints coming in as a result. Enix themselves took it upon themselves to move the release date of future Dragon Quest games to a Saturday. No government intervention required, but it still goes to show the absolute weight of the cultural impact of the Dragon Quest series over in Japan. Nowadays, Japan has stores, cafes, monuments, a whole theme park dedicated to the franchise. Hi there, I'm just interrupting past me because it's currently the 17th of December and I'm editing the video, and there's been some relevant news to the topic. Yuji Horii has just been given an award by Japan's Commissioner for Cultural Affairs for his and Dragon Quest's contribution to the arts and culture in Japan. That's a pretty big deal, and I thought it was very pertinent to the content of the video, so I had to pull out the camera and interject. I'll hand back over to past me now. I hope he's doing a good job. Dragon Quest is a household name, to the point where Roto's theme played during the opening ceremony of the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games. Speaking of music, yes, Dragon Quest's music has also been an inspiration to many. On the 20th of August 1987, following the release of Dragon Quest II earlier that year, composer Koichi Sugiyama held his Family Classics concert at the Suntory Hall in Tokyo. Now, this might sound like an inconsequential event, but this Family Classics concert with music from Dragon Quest I and II marked the first ever live video game music concert in the world, connecting the history of live video game concerts directly back to Dragon Quest, as so much can be. All roads lead to Rome and all that. The excellent video game music composer Yoko Shimomura, first known for her music in Live Alive, which is fantastic, and now more known for her work on the Kingdom Hearts series, talked in a Square Enix interview about how the song Heavenly Flight from Dragon Quest III was the most beautiful song that she'd ever heard. See, she was trained on classical music, and it was Dragon Quest that introduced her to the idea that classical music could be used in games, and she credits both Super Mario Bros. And Dragon Quest as being the reasons that she got into the creation of video game music. But that's just one individual out of the countless that I could mention. But games are nothing without the people who play them. So I wanted to invite a few friends and content creators in the space to hear about how Dragon Quest has impacted and influenced them. So I'm going to hand it over to them now.
Hello, my name's Gronya and I have a chest infection. I started playing Dragon Quest when I was 10 years old. I asked my parents for it for Christmas after I saw a Jedward ad on RTE, and the game followed me throughout the next 15 years of my life. I can't escape it, but now I have a YouTube channel and a Twitch stream that's pretty much entirely Dragon Quest focused. When I got sick with Crohn's disease, I used Dragon Quest a lot as a form of escapism to sort of run away from my problems, if you will, but it's always been kind of a comfort food for me. In April 2024, I had the absolute privilege of helping to preserve Dragon Quest VII's DLC, and being able to contribute to the fanbase in that regard meant so much to me. It did kind of kickstart my channel, and it led me to making a lot of the amazing friends that I've made through the Dragon Quest community, such as Dukey and Petchy, and everyone else in my community, and all the amazing other Dragon Quest content creators I've had the pleasure of knowing. But yeah, I'm very thankful that I encountered the game, and it continues obviously to have a big impact on my life. But that's pretty much all I have to say about it. More than a game for me in some regards.
Hi there everybody, and thank you so much, Petchy, for having me on your channel. This is David over at the channel DavidVinc, and today I want to talk about how Dragon Quest III impacted and influenced my life. It was a huge part of my upbringing. I first got it when I was in 4th grade, and I had broken my arm. I got into a bike accident, and I was home for pretty much a week while I recovered, and my mother felt bad for me. She wheeled the TV into my bedroom, and she got me Dragon Quest III, and the rest was history. I played that thing forever. Like, all day long, all night long. It was just ridiculous playing it, and I've loved it ever since. I love the job class system. I love everything about it. I love how it's based upon the world and world history. And I even became a history major in college, and I taught history in school. I taught high school history, and I do think that this game has some influence of that, because I've always been wanting to study the world and study the world map, and it got me interested in the culture and the mythology of a lot of these different areas that I went to in the game. And later on, I even played it in college when the Game Boy Color remake came out. And now that the HD 2D remake is out, I am reliving my childhood. I'm reliving all these memories and going on through it and just having a blast. I do hope that y'all are enjoying this game as much as I am. I am just having so much fun with it, and thank you so much, Petchy, for having me on. And I do hope to see all of y'all at my channel, DavidVinc. Have a good day.
Hey everyone, thanks so much Petchy for inviting me to this collab project. I just want to start off by saying Dragon Quest is a massive inspiration to me. Dragon Warrior was the first JRPG I ever played in my life, and it kind of created my love for the genre. But in terms of like my regular life, Dragon Quest has inspired me to just be a better person, to join and train martial arts. It's inspired me to take care of my body, get stronger, because I love level grinding and always have since I was a little kid. And when I'm in the gym or in the dojo or making videos, I just love the grind. It's something that I've always enjoyed, so something that would normally bore others. I think thanks to playing Dragon Warrior so young, it's never bothered me. In fact, I find it relaxing, and personal development is one of the greatest things of all time. And if not for Dragon Quest, I don't know if I would have this kind of outlook on that kind of thing. And on top of all that would honestly be my love for travel. I think since starting with Dragon Warrior on the NES as my first JRPG, exploration has always been like the #1 or #2 thing I look for in a great JRPG. And because of this like drive to explore new areas in all the Dragon Quest worlds, in a lot of the Dragon Quest games there's towns and kingdoms that are references to real life places. And I think it's exploring all these places across all the different Dragon Quest games that drive me to want to explore the world and experience new cultures, lifestyles, and landscapes. I'm constantly wanting to surround myself with new locations I've never been to before and fresh experiences from all around the world. I think Dragon Quest is a big reason why I love traveling so much. It's a big reason why I love the martial arts so much, and a big reason why I can do things that a lot of people find mundane or difficult. Thanks again for having me, Petchy, and I hope to see you guys someday on my channel as well.
So thank you for having me on to talk about some of my memories and thoughts on the Dragon Quest series and how it has inspired me. And it has inspired me because I first discovered it in 1989 as Dragon Warrior right here. And at the time, I was so into Dungeons and Dragons, and I loved that whole thing of going on quests, fighting monsters, leveling up. I fell in love with the concept of fantasy, and especially role-playing. And so I was like, what? I can buy a game and play that kind of thing at home on my own? I don't need all my friends around to play a game like that? And I think that's what was so exciting when I first played Dragon Warrior. I was like, wow, I can just have this one-player experience. And then, I was a fan of Dragon Ball, and I fell in love with the character designs. You can't see that right on here because it was the American box, but I started doing some research and I started seeing the original Akira Toriyama artwork for it, and I really fell in love with the monsters. Who knew back then, when I first saw slime on the screen, that it would become an iconic enemy in video games? I didn't know that. I just thought, oh, that's really charming of an enemy that you fight over and over and over again. I'm like, that's kind of fun. And yeah, I fell in love with the franchise at that point. And then I started playing Dragon Warrior 2, 3, and 4. Then finally they secured the name and they brought it out as, Dragon Warrior 7, then Dragon Quest 8, finally. And so it was really cool to see the transition from Dragon Warrior to Dragon Quest, which is its original name. And I just had a lot of fun over the years, going on quests, fighting monsters, exploring around different vehicles, different modes of travel. Very exciting stuff, and I really always loved how every kind of Dragon Quest was its own thing, except for like parts 1, 2, and 3, which are related, which I won't get into. But I fell in love with the series then, and it's like 35 years later, I'm still in love with it now.
Thank you so much to Gronya, DavidVinc, Dukey and HappyConsoleGamer for collaborating with me on this project. They're all excellent creators, and you should go and subscribe to them if you haven't already, and maybe subscribe to me while you're at it. Now it's my turn. The first Dragon Quest game that I played was Dragon Quest VIII on the PS2. When thinking about why I love Dragon Quest, there's always one moment that comes to mind. This might sound silly and dramatic, But flying across the overworld, hearing the heavenly flight music, something Yoko Shimomura and I apparently have in common, I got quite emotional. The series is just so overflowing with charm, lovable characters and adventure that to me there's just nothing like it. But beyond that, Dragon Quest is the reason I'm sat here now making these videos. It's a community. I've met and spoken to so many people all over the world thanks to this franchise. It's a comfort, it's an obsession, it's an inspiration. And I'd love to hear from some of you in the comments about how Dragon Quest has inspired you. Not everybody will love Dragon Quest. There is no way for a game or a franchise to be universally loved by everyone, and gaming is of course a medium full of discourse and disagreement. But Dragon Quest, whether directly or indirectly, connects many of us and the games that we love. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.